the antecedent of the sheep was found in what the word called the iniquity of us all.
Yeah.
That iniquity would be that particular atonement.
And if you actually look at it, it's not even really talking about sheep per se. It's talking about all of us being likened to the nature of sheep. All right, so the sheep, we, us, the elect, that's one entity. That's one person. Who else is mentioned in this verse? There's two more. Uh-huh. Yep. Uh-huh. There's two more entities that I discovered in this verse. There's two. There's three. Okay. So, theoretically, the problem is between two of those. The problem is between the wayward sheep and the Lord, right? And theoretically, if there was a problem, then that needs to be paid for somewhere between us and the Lord. But then party number three comes in. Party number three being the sacrifice of Jesus Christ. That party had to come in because there was no way that the sheep could pay for the problem. Do you see that? And the fact, I mean, vicarious substitution is all over in Isaiah 53. And I believe it's even I think I saw it back here in chapter 52. I think it was verse 13, 14. But anyway, we're looking at chapter 53, verse 6. Because between party A, the Lord, party B, us, the wayward sheep, in comes party C and says, I'm going to pay off on behalf of party B, party number two. Do you see that? That's how Jesus Christ is the sin bearer. Is he paying for his own misdeeds? Is he paying for his own sin? Well, of course not. He was not born with a sin nature, nor does he have any performance sins that he has to pay for. He had a perfect life. He's paying for us. Now, I noticed some other things. Were the sheep lost? Were they missing? We don't know what happened to them? Or was it volitional? What does it say right there at the beginning, the first half? And Jerry, this goes to what you were referring to. What does it say in the first half of verse 6? It says us. Well, what's the action verb, Chuck? Turned. Now mine is ESV, so mine uses the word gone, but it's still an action verb. Yes. Yes. And so what jumped out at me was, this isn't something accidental that happened and oh, look at the poor tragic thing that happened to me. I need to be saved because this thing happened to me. No, they're action verbs. Gone astray. They turned everyone to their own way. This was volitional. But God. The sin bearer came in and said, I'm going to solve this problem on their behalf. They have no ability to solve this problem on their own, nor do they have an interest in solving it on their own. You know, you look at a sheep out there wandering, it's like, no, he's just wandering of his own free will, if we could use that. They have no interest in coming back. But God demonstrated his love toward us in that while we were yet sinners, Christ died for us. To pull in Romans 5:8. And going back to the problem of the three entities, Jesus Christ steps in, and the Lord laid on him the iniquity of us all. What was the only action that we did in all that? We went astray. We turned away. And it was something that I thought of later on. Let me put it this way: the negotiation, if we could use that term, the negotiation was between God the Father and God the Son. Negotiate. Say what? What I mean by that, I was looking further in our lesson. We were talking about the serpent being lifted up, and Jesus Christ is the one that brought the solution. Jesus Christ was the one that brought the solution of against God's judgment against us. We didn't bring the solution. It was Jesus Christ that did. And the point that I'm simply making is we're not the ones negotiating the terms of us being delivered from judgment. It was Jesus Christ that did. And the whole idea that, well, I came to God. I'm the one that made that choice. No, you didn't. No, I didn't. I think it was Jonathan Edwards that said the only part that I contributed to my salvation was the sin that made it necessary. I was the one that went astray. I was the one that turned to my own way. I wasn't lost as if some terrible thing happened to me. I was the one that went astray. And so I was not part of the assuaging of God's judgment. I was not part of that negotiation. That went on between God the Father and God the Son. And remember what Abraham said to Isaac? God will provide himself a lamb. It was not by works of righteousness which we have done. It was according to his mercy that we are saved. Okay. There's one other thing that leapt out at me. And that was from Isaiah chapter 6. Remember what was the first thing that Isaiah said? After he saw the Lord high and lifted up, the angel brought before the angel brought the coal. And then he said, there we go. I live among a people of unclean lips. I live among a people that everyone turned to his own way. Do you see the collective term there? All we like sheep have turned aside and gone our own way. Isaiah, again, this is still in the same book. Isaiah is understanding that he's part of a people that had gone their own way. Isaiah didn't remove himself and say, they are all bad, but I'm the prophet of God, so I'm good to go. No, Isaiah was realizing, hey, I'm among a people of unclean lips. This is all of us. All we like sheep have gone astray. Mm-hmm. 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 Only to that cross I cling. Mm-hmm. Absolutely. Nice little note here at the bottom of the page. The Lord in Hebrew, that is Yahweh, way. The Lord imputed the sins of his people to his only begotten Son. The word fall indicates falling or striking. The sins of God's people fell upon Christ with an overwhelming, rushing violence as an attacking army or a sudden, relentless storm. And the Lord has laid on him the iniquity of us all. This was not just, oh yeah, I'll pick that up, I'll do that. No, this was the sin of mankind, the sin for his people falling on a perfect and holy God. All right, let's turn the page. Let's look at a verse. Again, we've looked at this one before, but let's take a look at it some more. 2 Corinthians 5:21. Can anyone quote that one without looking at it? He who knew no sin has become sin for us, that we might be made the righteousness of God in him. And John MacArthur has said that this is the most beautiful summation of the gospel. If you could sum it up in the most brief of terms, it would be this: he who knew no sin became sin for us. Again, do you see the three entities in this verse? The three entities being us, God, and Jesus Christ. I kind of look at it this way. I hope it's not cheapening it, but it's kind of as if we, the sinner, are over here and the adults are making a transaction over here. It's like, no, you go sit while the adults talk. And God the Father and God the Son made a transaction, and we stayed out of it. Well, yes. No, I'm absolutely. No, I'm not intentionally trying to omit the Holy Spirit. Yes. I'm simply saying that us, the offenders, are not part of the transaction, not part of the terms and the negotiation and all that sort of thing. We're over here. We're the party of the enmity. We're the party of the offenders. But between God the Father and God the Son, through the Holy Spirit, God the Son makes the sacrifice. God the Father is appeased. But it's not something that the offenders accomplished. That's the point that I'm getting at. Oh, yes. Yes, we're part of the equation, but we're not part of the quote-unquote negotiations. Right.
I don't think I like the term negotiation.
Okay.
Not in that context at all.
Okay.
They were not negotiating.
No.
Hear me out. Use that term means that they were in deliberation of this. They were not. They were in perfect harmony. And that plan did not need any negotiation. It was decreed by God in the Scripture.
Sure.
I don't like that term. I don't think that's a problem.
Okay. Okay.
The Trinity did not have to negotiate anything. And I think the implication of that is that there may be disunity within the context of the Trinity, and that's not the case.
Right. That was never part of my thinking, that there was somehow disunity or they had to work out something.
Those words mean those.
Sure.
I just want to make sure that
Yeah.
we don't confuse that issue. Let's use the proper terms.
Okay. Yeah. All right. In the middle of page 42, Christ was made sin in the same way that the believer is made the righteousness of God. What a thought. Imputed to us is the righteousness of God. Imputed to Christ was the sins of his people. Again, it's part of that great exchange. And it's summed up beautifully in 2 Corinthians 5:21. Let me read it in the ESV. For our sake, he made him to be sin, who knew no sin. This was one of the interesting things that came to my mind, was that Jesus traded his heavenly reputation for the sinful reputation. Does it mean that he adopted a sin nature? No. But it means that he took on him the form of a slave, according to Philippians 2, and was made in the likeness of man. And he paid the penalty, a penalty that we could never pay. Also, we had no interest in paying. We liked being a wandering sheep. That was the epitome of our existence as far as we're concerned. We like it that way. I think it's presented as in, well, man would save himself if he could. No. Doesn't it say in another place that no one seeks after God? Also, there's this thing that I'm learning about, that it's the mention throughout Scripture of our understanding. How understanding of a heart does sinful man have? Not very. Doesn't 2 Corinthians 4 talk about having their understandings darkened? Doesn't Proverbs tell us not to lean on our own understanding? The understanding heart of a sinner says, I like my sin. But it's when the light of the glorious gospel comes in and we're turned by the Lord. That's when we see. And isn't it the fear of the Lord is the beginning of wisdom? So I don't want to trust in the understanding of my sinful heart. Let's also look at it this way. My free will and the understanding of my heart created this problem in the first place. How could the same understanding heart go ahead and choose God in and of itself? It never would. It wouldn't want to. So it's not just that we would come to God if we could. No, we wouldn't. No man seeks after God. We like our sin. Right, right. And I've had people try to debate me on that. Well, doesn't the Old Testament say, choose you this day whom you will serve? Doesn't it say, seek the Lord while he may be found? Yeah, that's the paradox. God commands us to do something we can't do. We have no interest in doing anyway. What's the answer? The answer is always Christ. The answer is always Christ. Always begins with God. It ends with God, and God is the vehicle. God is the source of the motivation. God is the answer to everything. The only thing we contributed to the whole thing was our sin. All right. Hebrews chapter 9. I'd like you to turn to that. Some really good things to look at here. And actually, the book says verses 27 and 28. I would like to go all the way back up to verse 23 and just kind of capture a lot of the context here. I'm going to start in verse 23. Thus it was necessary for the copies of the heavenly things to be purified with these rites, but the heavenly things themselves with better sacrifices than these. For Christ has entered not into holy places made with hands, which are copies of the true things, but into heaven itself, now to appear in the presence of God on our behalf. Nor was it to offer himself repeatedly, as the high priest enters the holy places every year with blood not his own. For then he would have to suffer repeatedly since the foundation of the world. But as it is, he appeared once for all at the end of the ages to put away sin by the sacrifice of himself. And just as it is appointed unto man to die once, and after that comes judgment, so Christ, having been offered once to bear the sins of many, will appear a second time, not to deal with sin, but to save those who are eagerly waiting for him. Did you notice the words that I was emphasizing in there? Say what? Oh. Joshua, did you notice anything? Okay. Teacher asked the question, and I stretched by doing this. That's okay. That's okay. Here's what I was trying to emphasize, and I underlined it in my Bible as I was studying this. Up here in verse 25, it says, "Nor was it to offer himself repeatedly." And then, in verse 26, "For then he would have had to suffer repeatedly. But as it is, he has appeared once for all." And then also again down in verse 28, "So Christ having been offered once." So there's two mentions of the word repeatedly, and then there's two mentions of the term once for all. Do you see the contrast there? Okay. So the reason I bring that up is there are plenty of people that would go to a passage like this and say, well, don't you see here? The scope of salvation means it's once for everybody. Is that what's being discussed in this passage? It's not being discussed at all. It's the repeated nature of human sacrifices versus the once and done, once and for all, never has to be repeated, superior sacrifice of Christ. And it's all here in one passage. Now, is that a question, young man?
Yeah.
Yes, sir. Right. Right. And even if you look at John 3:16 and use the term the believing ones, is Jesus Christ coming back for everybody? No, he's coming back for the believing ones. So it's right there, but if we see it, unless we look at that passage and say, oh, well, once for all, that means everybody. That means Jesus died for the whole world. That's not what it says, does it? We're talking about time. We're talking about how many times a sacrifice has to be repeated. Repeatedly versus once. Now, there's something else to notice here in this section, and that is the contrast between earthly sacrifices versus heavenly sacrifices. Let's take a look. In the tabernacle, what does it say here in verse 24? Holy places made with hands, which are what? Copies of the true things. And according, again, we mentioned it earlier, but I'll mention it, tied it together. Colossians 2 says, but the substance is Christ, right? So I looked at it, I wrote it down this way. The tabernacle was the pattern of earthly sacrifices. Crucifixion of Christ was a heavenly sacrifice that took place on earth. We can't look at the sacrifice of Christ as if it was an earthly sacrifice. I think that would be a mistake. Because the sacrifice of Christ was so far superior. It was the Son of God. And the sacrifice of the Old Testament was only a copy, it was only a picture. It was that reverse echo. But the substance, the actual issue, the actual item was Christ. And Christ's sacrifice didn't just affect mankind. We talked earlier, sorry, turning my phone off. We talked earlier about atonement and the fact that it covered in sort of a temporary way. But the sacrifice of Christ appeased God and said, it's done. It's expiated. Separated from the as far as the east is from the west. And so just looking at the two different things, earthly sacrifices, earthly copies of the heavenly. And the sacrifice of Christ was that heavenly sacrifice. And that's one of the things that I do enjoy reading about in Hebrews, is the contrast between the earthly and the heavenly, and noticing the superiority of Christ. It wasn't just that it was, oh, well, his was better. No, it's so much more than that. Superlative, the best, the top, the full atonement, full appeasement of God the Father. That was the sacrifice of Christ. And so as a result, it never had to be repeated. It wasn't that it was that good. To me, that language is just insufficient. It was so far and away. It was more than enough. But it was specific. Just like, yes, sir. Just like the priest had those stones on his chest when the priest would go in and make those sacrifices, he had the 12 stones on his chest. What was the stones for? The 12 tribes of Israel. He was representing them. In the same way, Jesus Christ was representing the many, his elect. All we like sheep have gone astray. And God laid on him the iniquity of us all. I thought of it this morning. Seems like, and maybe this is just my imagination, but it seems like sometimes people present the gospel as if, oh, choose God, choose Jesus, try Jesus. It's like, what is this? Again, it's just my imagination, but what is this? Handing out samples at Costco? Oh, somebody come try Jesus, try this, try these new crackers we have. Are you kidding? What a cheapening of the gospel. Try Jesus? I don't think so. This is God the Almighty. This is God, the creator of heaven and earth, supplying by himself the sacrifice that would pay for the sins of the many. This is not a sign-up sheet to choose salvation if you want to. Vastly different. Vastly different.
That's what a priesthood does. Their model of priesthood emerges from the Old Testament model of priesthood. And they view their responsibility in the Mass is to re-sacrifice Christ every time they perform the Mass, except the last one. Well, they don't want them reading the Bible. Or they killed men who were translating the Bible out of Latin. It's blasphemy. And it's idolatry.
It's idolatry, and the fact that they leave him up on the cross.
Well, and how clear is this text? I mean, this isn't the only. You just go up to chapter 9 here, verse 12. ones for all having obtained those fruit. This is nothing to be repeated. There's no, how can you repeat the sacrifice of the second person of the Trinity on the cross?
Right.
You can't. And yet, that's what they do. That's what they believe they do.
Right. And the whole idea of transubstantiation, let's bring his body down again. Absolutely not. Absolutely not. And the truth is right here. And if a music guy can figure it out just by reading it and studying it, if I can understand it, anybody else can too. Right. Right. You do. Because these... Exactly. That's what's lacking, because these things are spiritually appraised. Yeah. Right. Right. Mm-hmm. 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 Top to bottom, signifying that this was not accomplished by man. Right. Mm-hmm. 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 Here's just a thought. Were the average Jews just practicing the law and just doing what the law said, or were they told what to think about it?
Well, if they could find righteousness in the law, then what would the need of Christ be?
Right. Right.
There was no righteousness in the law. They could never obtain righteousness through the law.
And they were never supposed to. What they were supposed to do was supposed to see their own futility in keeping the law and then say, how are we supposed to do this? This can't be done in and of ourselves. There's got to be somebody else that comes and does this because we can't. And that's, I believe, how the law was supposed to be a tutor, a schoolmaster, to bring them to Christ. But that's right on the brink of another whole discussion, and we're not going to take that up this week. So we will end there for this morning. Excellent discussion. Let's bow in prayer. Lord, thank you for these things that you have shown.